If you want the ultimate control in an LED light with not a whole ton of cost behind it, there are few better options than the Fluval 3.0's Pro Mode. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today we're going to go to part 3 of the ultimate guide to the Fluval 3.0 Plant LED. And this one is all about Pro Mode. Now, Pro Mode, if you don't happen to see that on your light, it means you need a firmware update. We've covered that in the first video. That's going to be up in the corner right now for you to go check out. But a short version, when you look into your light, there's going to be 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner of your app. Touch that, and then you should see an ability to update your firmware. If not, in the device list, hold down the name of your device, and you should see an option to slide it left or right, with one way getting you upgrade. Once you have your light upgraded, you're able to access Pro Mode. Before we get going in this video, in the previous videos and this one, I will be using lots of screenshots of various settings that I'm proposing. A pinned comment in each video, and in this video especially, will include all of the pictures you need available up on a website. This particular video will have one to all the previous screenshots, but then each video will have its own individual screenshots pinned in a comment. So if you want to go back and check those out, it'll be easy to find. Comment from me, find the pin, it'll be right at the very top. It'll have a link. You can go download all the pictures of those settings just in case you need them more easily accessible to program into your own light. With that being said, let's dive into why Pro Mode is important. Now, in the previous video when we talked about Auto Mode, I was really vehement that, it'll probably 90% of users are going to just really only need Auto Mode. They get a nice sunrise, a sunset, and a daytime. You can include an optional night period that allows you to tweak your lights, let the app do everything for you. It's nice, it's easy, it's simple, it's great. But for advanced users, well, Pro Mode's the only way to go. A couple of key tips about Pro Mode. First off, when we're setting our timers in there, we can basically flex these wherever we want. But the important thing is the very first point and the very last point need to be whatever our night setting is. So if our goal is to have our lights go completely off, then our very first point on our timeline and our very last point on our timeline need to be zeros everywhere. That way the time between these points, so from nighttime to the morning, it's off. Hope that makes sense. Number 2, you can add additional points, up to 10 total points on the timeline as of the current version of the software. This is being shot at the very end of the year 2020, so if there's an update, that might change, but more than likely I would think 10 is probably where they're going to keep it. A final note here is that at each individual point, keep in mind that you get to adjust every one of the 5 spectrums of color in this light. That means that you have the absolute most control over this light in Pro Mode. You can do nearly anything with this light if you choose to. Do you want to do some kind of crazy colored light show, to do some kind of neat YouTube filming project? Pro Mode might be the way to set this up for a time lapse or something like that. If you want to have some kind of crazy simulation of daytime color, or you want to really focus on certain colors in your fish at a certain time of day, let's say, for example, you've got rainbow fish, and you know that those males are going to try and court those females at a specific time every day. You can program your lights to look a little different to make that color really pop at a specific time if you want to. That is the beautiful part about Pro Mode. You can do so much inside of Pro Mode. You have so much control, so much capability. Now, previously I've talked about several settings, with Day Sim being my most suggested setting, and we will be using that again here. But there are 2 other settings I want to cover, just so that you get an idea of what you can do inside of Pro Mode without looking at just one setting. The important thing is when we open the application and we select Pro Mode, you're going to have a timer where you can put time points, and each time point lets you set a different setting. Now here's the important part that can be confusing for first people using this light. Setting a power mode at one point, if you want to maintain this part, so let's say that you're going 100% whites at your maximum power, right? In order to maintain 100% whites for say 4 hours, 4 hours after the start point, you need to add an end point with the same settings as the start point, that 100% on all the white lights. Otherwise, you're gonna crest up to that and then move to whatever the next value is. So if it's higher, let's say that this point was 75 and this point's 100, between here it's going to ramp between those two, right? So it's gonna slowly increase light between those periods or decrease if it's down lower. Let's say that you're at 100 and the next point is 50%, you're gonna hit 100 and immediately start going back down instead of maintaining that light for a while. Make sure if there's a particular setting you want to keep for a period of time, you have 2 time points, a start and end with how long you want that power to occur. Otherwise, between any 2 points, the light is either going to ramp up or ramp down for each individual color based on the settings you created, evenly distributing that ramp over that period of time. Now, this can be really cool. This allows us to simulate day or any kind of light style that we want. So with that being said, let's dive into some example settings and why we would use some of these. Do we want our mornings to have a lot more blue light and then have that all burn away to just pure white for our daytime? And then as we get to the afternoon, have a sunset that's mostly that warmer red and yellow tones? We can do that. In fact, here's an example right here. You're gonna notice that in this setting, there's a lot of blue at first. The white slowly starts ramping in, that blue kind of tilts off. And then as we get to the end of it, we get to the high point, it's all white, it's nice and bright. There's a little bit of blue and stuff in there still, and a little bit of red. And then that white really falls off kind of fast, and we're left with just the warm white and the pink to give us that nice sunset-y kind of tone of light. And this is just an example of the way that you can play with the light. Do you want more blue light to show up only during your high point in the day? Let's say that for the most part you want like 3% blue almost all day, but between your maximum power settings, you want it at like 80%. You're a crazy person, you want tons of blue. You can do that in Pro Mode. It's all about how you set this up. Another example of where Pro Mode is extremely powerful is for those who like a siesta. And let me give you a couple reasons why you would want a siesta that don't involve some of the plant growth theories that are out there. It's well known that I have often discussed that several grow houses, whether it's vertical farms or various other indoor growing activities, the places that used to use siestas don't do it anymore because they found that it wasn't efficient. So what does that tell us? You don't need a siesta, and if professional growers don't do it, it's probably not as good as it's cracked up to be. However, where I would say siestas are a good idea is, let's say you're somebody like me. You have pretty long hours, but you want to be able to see your fish in beautiful light when you're home. This is where we have an option to have a split day. We can have a time in the middle where everything's turned off while you're at work, but in the morning and in the evening, or however your work schedule is, you can have miniature day cycles that are only a few hours long so that you get to enjoy that time with your fish. Here's an example in a screenshot right here. You're going to notice that my sunrise starts at 5 a.m. I get to a full day by 6 a.m., right? And then it's on for a couple hours. It's 8 a.m. I got to get out the door. It's going to start sunsetting on my fish when I'm leaving. Then you got a long period of time where it's completely off. This is my night. It's sleepy time for our fish. And then we get back right as I'm leaving work. It's going to take me so long to get home. Got that sunrise starting again to wake my fish up, get them used to things again. By the time I'm home, it's daylight again. I get to see my fish in all their glory. I got a few more hours, and then right when it's about time for me to start hitting the hay, sunset, baby. It's gonna kick in. I get to see a little bit of that beautiful color and go, oh, you know what? It's time to go to bed. Good night, my fish. Good night, me. It's a great, great thing for folks who have a work day and want to make sure they get to see their fish in full light instead of having tons of light all day long, right? This is a way to reduce the amount of light and help reduce algae, especially in lower tech setups. Now, if you have CO2, you do need to make sure that whenever you do these siestas, you're not pushing CO2 for too long and causing a massive buildup. I personally think if you have a CO2 tank, just don't do a siesta. unless you absolutely need it because you work extremely long hours. Let's say you work like 3 12-hour shifts a week instead of working, the normal 8-hour shift a day, right? Then it's understandable to kind of change your light settings. But otherwise, I wouldn't do this with CO2. But with a non-CO2 tank going low tech, this is a great option to make sure you're not pushing too much light on your tank. But while you're home, that tank is beautifully lit and you get to enjoy your fish and your plants. A couple of quick notes also about Pro Mode. Now that you've looked at a couple example settings, we have our day sim that's going to come up here in just a second. Just like auto mode, you can save and export multiple settings to make it easy to just bounce them across multiple tanks, or try different ones through a tank depending on the time of year it is. There's lots of options here for you. But also, beyond just the export, the save, and the preview, there's an overview button. And if we look at this in this screenshot here, it's going to show you something like this. It's going to show you every time code and how much light is being shined on your tank at that time. This is a way at a very quick glance to get an idea of what your power setting is for every single step without having to touch each individual point. You get the raw number values. This is just handy if you want to hand it to a friend because maybe they want to copy your settings. Maybe you're copying my settings, and this is a way to see those very quickly at a glance. This is a setting that I tested quite a lot. I've used it in lots of my tanks. I use it over in my guppy mansion, which is over here. This tank behind me has been on day sim for a long time. The tank with my angelfish and Bob the Sponge, also on day sim. And other tanks that I have versions of day sim that are running that tend to be like slightly less powerful because the tank is more shallow, or for an example, don't last quite as long in the day because there's not a heavy plant load in the tank. An example being something like my pleco tank, my 30 breeder, right? So why is this setting the thing that I tout the most? In my experience testing this light and messing with lots of different settings in Pro Mode, this is the setting where I have seen the best growth in my plants, regardless of the type of plant. But I want to caution people here. If you are using CO2 or not, that doesn't matter. What matters is that plants with enough density will use as much light as you give them. So something like my day sim helps get very powerful portions of light in a day, but the overall light is not a whole ton. You're not overloading this tank. So this helps reduce algae a little bit because we're not shining this max light all the time, 12 hours a day. Bentley, you're a madman. No, we're slowly ramping into. We have a period of very strong light, and then we ramp away from it. We're trying to simulate day, in a sense, in the way that the light is designed in this setting. However, what's key here is that by reducing the light for certain periods of day and creating this kind of neater effect, we're also inhibiting algae growth and helping the plants. As we try to simulate a day cycle, the plants kind of get to slowly ramp into their intake of carbon that's naturally in the water, whether it's liquid carbon, injected CO2, or just the natural CO2 in the tank. All those nutrients that are there. And then a slow ramp down where they're slowly consuming less and less as the light becomes less plentiful. This mimics a more natural setting. And while there's no science behind this to prove it, I have just observed that I tend to see much more robust growth out of my plants doing this across tanks, regardless of whether or not they have injected CO2, than I do with some of the other settings I've tested. Now, a lot of this is a personal enjoyment. I just like the effect and the way that this works, right? It's something I enjoy. I like being able to see a sunset or a sunrise happening. Very often when I'm in my fish room in the morning, the lights are starting to sunrise when I'm feeding my fish. It's just something I enjoy. I see the fish starting to get, a little bit of lights coming in, a little bit of lights coming in. There's the guy with the food, get all excited. It's kind of simulating a day cycle for them, and I really enjoy that. It's like that night baiting away. There's still a little bit of bugs around and stuff. We throw a flake food on there, and they just go hog wild. It's something that I enjoy from an aesthetic point of view. Does that mean that this is better than auto mode? No. Do we have more control in Pro Mode than auto mode? Oh, yes. And can we have a little bit more fun and do things if we want to simulate specific parts of the world and the way that their light affects the water? we can do that inside of Pro Mode. And that is the really, really powerful and cool part of Pro Mode. The ability to truly simulate a day's light cycle. Give it a try, see if you like it. But in the end, what really matters here is that you can do anything you really want in Pro Mode. It's all about playing with your light, checking your tank, and making sure that you're seeing what you want to see. Good plant health, not too much algae. You have lots of room. I've had lots of people give me tons of feedback. This setting is so amazing. I took that setting and I added more blue and it worked perfectly. Or I took away some of the red because I didn't like how it gave a kind of warm yellowy cast to my light. People have given me lots of feedback on this setting, the day sim, that is. And I've made some alternates because of it, just because I wanted to try a few other things. And honestly, I've just never found something that fit my taste as well as day sim does. But what's important is that people have found their own way, their own version of my setting, and had success. So what does that mean for you? Do the same. When you're ready for Pro Mode, strap in, start with a simple setting that someone else maybe's created, and then start playing with it. Find what you like the best and use it. That's it, guys. That is your ultimate guide to the Fluval 3.0 Plant LEDs Pro Mode. What I'd love to hear in the comments down below is how many of you have tried one of my settings? How many of you have a different setting? How many of you have never tried Pro Mode and now you want to try Pro Mode? I really want to hear from you guys down in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you've enjoyed this series, give it a like. If for some reason you've watched all 3 of these videos and you're not a fan of this particular light, or you can't believe that I would go on for this many videos about one stupid light, you can hit the thumbs down twice. I'll understand. If this is your first time viewing this channel, make sure that you check the playlist and watch the rest of the stuff about this particular light. This is going to complete the guide. Really, it's only 3 steps. It's very simple, but more importantly, there's several other great series out there. Fertilizer 101, Substrate 101. These will give you all the tips you need to really dive deep into a planted aquarium. And if you already do planted aquariums, this is going to help you find even more success. Consider subscribing, maybe even ring that notification bell. And if you think this video could help someone else, share it their way. Sharing is caring, right? As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.